It's gonna be a good one.
It's gonna be a good one.
Definitely a different type of process.
Cut down or freeze up.
Being a coach's son.
Jackson, of course, they keep retooling. One stolen base, a hit by pitch. Oh my goodness.
Hey, welcome back to Baseball 101. We are here today with a D2 coach, not just a D2 coach, but one of the better D2 coaches of one of the better D2 programs. I'll say D2 many times today because we're talking about D2 baseball. So we've talked about JUCO with Kevin Mulder a couple weeks ago. I don't even know what week it is, but at some point, me and Kevin talked about JUCO baseball. And then we've been talking about recruiting and some of the rule changes, and we've been talking about the importance of keeping your mind open to other opportunities besides D1, which is going to be very limited with the current rule changes. So I thought the best thing to do would be to talk to Coach Evers about D2 baseball and what he looks for and just all the wonderful things about D2, and I think I've hit the quota for D2 for the day. So thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. I'm happy to do it.
So hopefully, whoever watching, you learned some things today. But we've been talking about JUCO, and you actually coached at Jeffco for a while. You played JUCO baseball, so you're a big fan of JUCO baseball, I'm assuming.
Yeah, loved junior college, loved my time there, and loved my time coaching at Jeffco. So got to spend 9 years of it, and I don't know if I could ever go back and do it. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun.
You were at Jeffco, I don't know, I'm asking, but you were there after Mulder?
I was there before Mulder. So I was there, I was an assistant for 5 years under Sam Carroll, and then head coach for 4 years after Sam went on. And then when I left and went to Maryville, Kevin came into Jeffco.
So I've got, okay, that's all straight in my head now that if Kevin was here, he would know these things, but I don't know the history of Jeffco baseball because I went to Merrimack. Sorry, St. Louis Community College.
Yeah, it's hard to get used to that.
Well, the fact that there's no more Forest Park or Flow Valley still bothers me. Like you went to Forest Park, right?
Went to Forest Park, and then it's kind of hard to explain to like everybody now. Like, oh, where'd you go and get started? It's like, well, I went to Forest Park Community College, and you have to explain that it doesn't really exist anymore.
No, now it's just one, which is whatever. But as far as Maryville goes, you've been there now. This is year 7?
Yep, year 7.
So I'm reading notes here, so I got these things. So let me just tell you, if you don't know about Maryville, Maryville has been doing much better since you got there. Not that they weren't good before, but you have definitely moved them onto kind of that elite status. So last year you won 40 games, most in program history. Mm-hmm. And then you won the GLVC tournament, correct?
Yeah, the conference tournament we won, and then our second straight year making an appearance in NCAA regional.
So I don't know. Where is the D2 World Series?
Cary, North Carolina. So it's been there, 10
is
years,
that the USA
years.
complex?
It's the USA complex,
So
yeah.
my son played at that complex. Beautiful complex.
I haven't been there yet. I'd like to be there someday.
But did you go to Grand Junction?
When I was at Jeffco, went to Grand Junction 3 times.
That's the JUCO World Series for those that don't know.
When I was playing in college, when I was playing at Central Missouri, we went to the D2 World Series, which was in Montgomery, Alabama at the time.
Yeah, we talked about Grand Junction with Mulder, and I got to go a couple times at Merrimack.
It's special experience.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's JUCO baseball is tremendous, and I highly recommend for those that don't know, get out and watch some baseball, which we're going to talk about. But thing I hear all the time, especially with high school kids, I'm around them all day, every day. I get asked all the time, like, what are college coaches looking for? And I'm like, well, I can tell you what I would be looking for, but since I'm not a college coach, thought you'd be the one to kind of answer. When you go out and watch potential athletes for you, what are some things you're looking for?
I think it's still like the evaluation process is still. I don't want to explain when people ask me like, "Hey, what's recruiting like?" Well, it's not that. It's going out and watching baseball, and you watch baseball enough, you can kind of tell. Hey, here's how they move, how they go about it. There's obviously a lot of the measurable things that you see, but then it's also just sitting back and watching a game, and hey, how they go about, how they play, how they swing a bat, how they run on and off the field, the actions, just all the little things that you pick up watching a game. Like I don't think ever that's the hard part evaluating a player as far as, hey, how a person's moving, watching enough baseball. You can tell, hey, that guy's pretty good. That guy's going to be pretty good. That works. That doesn't work. I think the other challenge to recruiting is, you can identify them, and then it's, hey, getting them to come to your campus and figuring out what's a fit for your school.
I think that's a tough thing to explain to parents and to players. Coaches and people that have been around baseball their whole life, it doesn't take long to assess this kid projectability-wise. You can see a kid's actions and go, this kid's going to develop or potentially develop into something, even though the other kid might, at the current moment, have a higher average, a higher velo. The actions aren't as good in one as the other, and you're looking for projectability so that you can develop them into the player you want. And I think I know it's frustrating for parents to be like, well, my kid's better than that kid. Well, your kid had a beard in 7th grade. It's just things are going to even out long term. So you're looking more projectability over current performance, correct?
Yeah, I think so. But it's still, when you're recruiting someone, you still want to see somebody that's having success and able to get the job done. And then there's so much other stuff goes in, like what's a fit for the school? What's a fit from an academic standpoint? And then, even, hey, what are the needs that we have as a program? And that's the other big part of it. It's always, heck, I had one of my players the other day, like, hey, well, you didn't really recruit me out of high school. We got him as he transferred. It's like, why didn't you recruit me out of high school? It's like, I don't know if we had a need. We might have had a senior at that point or a junior coming back. And it's what you have a need for as well.
There's so many pieces to the recruiting of your needs and the type of kid, academics and all. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. It's just not the on-field performance, which the other thing that comes up all the time that parents, I hear, the metrics part. The bat speed, all these things are being assessed. Do you pay any attention to those things, or do you look more on just what you're watching?
I kind of value a little bit more what I'm watching, but it's not to say you don't ignore any of those metrics. Yeah. But, it's not that it's ever a bad thing, but it's like every summer when people, hey, transfer portal kind of takes off, and then there's, hey, 20-second clips on Twitter or on X or social media, whatever it is, and hey, here's my metrics of it, and then you go back and, hey, we can go through synergy, you look at the stats. It's like, well, it didn't really translate on the field. So I'd much prefer watching someone play the game as opposed to, hey, here's the bat speed, here's the blast motion data, here's the rep soda, here's the TrackMan data. Like, that's all valuable and important, but it's still about going out there and playing the game.
You have to play. You did bring up, and I'm curious because it's different for, I think, each coach, each program, but if a kid wants to be seen by you, what's the best way? You were talking about social media. You see clips, you see bits and pieces. I'm assuming you do camps in the summer. What's the best way for a kid to get in front of you so you're seeing their?
I want to say it's easier and easier to get seen just because there's so many more events, and whether it's you're going to Grand Park or you're going over to Kansas City and you're making kind of the circuit, you're going to see a lot of people. It's always. Hey, if you get a personal email, there's something I'm going to look into a little bit more. Hey, if someone comes to camp, obviously that's right in front of us. I mean, we're fortunate. We host a lot of tournaments over the course of the summer, whether it's Play 9 events that we have, there's PBR events. I mean, it's become easier and easier to get in front of coaches. So, I'd like to think we do a pretty good job of getting a chance to see everybody or see the people that we feel like we need to see.
It's a good fit.
But
so you don't. And I'm only asking because I get asked, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people. You most of the kids that you recruit are more local. You're not pulling – I mean, you will get other kids, but you're not going – let's try this. You're not going to Lake Point, Atlanta to do a lot of recruiting. It's more Kansas City.
Yeah, we kind of circle a 5-hour radius. And not to say there's not a random person, one or two that we have on the roster. Hey, we've got one from – Charlotte, North Carolina, or somebody's from Florida. Now, we saw those guys at one point, but it wasn't the traditional means of, hey, we're within a 5-hour radius, and you're pretty much covering that Midwest region. Yeah. Whether it's, hey, we're going to Minneapolis, or, hey, Northern Indiana, or Indianapolis, or Kansas City. I mean, that's usually the.
And that's what you're staying, and most players do stay within that 5 hour. I mean, and that's why I think it has been frustrating for me. My son just got done with the club baseball thing, and he was at a little bit different level, but to see the amount of hours spent traveling to be seen by schools that you're not going to play at is unbelievable to me. Like, for all levels of kids and stuff, focusing on, if you're interested in playing D2 baseball, even in this state, you have Maryville, who's done very well, and Central Missouri that's done very well, amongst other programs, UMSL, McKendree, there's a lot. But why are we wasting so much money traveling just to be seen by coaches that really, unless you're elite, you're going to stay somewhere close to home?
Yeah, no, and I think it's great. And I haven't gone to Atlanta in, heck, I think 5 or 6 years, which I'm kind of happy about just because.
And yet you're still being successful.
Yeah, we're doing fun. But it's all,
Yeah.
when I would go down there, you're going to see Midwest teams that were playing there. And obviously it's taken off
Yeah.
as far as going to Grand Park or Creekside. It's made it easier. So you don't have to,
Yeah.
hey, I don't have to drive 10 hours down to Atlanta. But even when I was going to those events, it was going to see kids from the Midwest that were playing down there. I think there's probably there's a small number of players that really probably benefits. Hey, someone like Titus or a real, hey, high level, hey, there's 1% kind of kid that, hey, this is beneficial and this is a good experience. But there's a majority of them, hey, it's money's better well spent. There's better opportunities staying within that 5-hour radius.
I hope you, college coach, said it. Not just me. I've been saying it forever. So, but even with that 1%, like we were talking before we got on, like you're looking in the portal currently, and a lot of the kids from last year's 24 group that went away that were that 1% are now in the portal. Not all of them, but some of them are now coming back or looking to come back because of whatever reason. There's a lot of different reasons, but typically the process is if you stay closer to home, you typically stay there. If you go away, for a lot of kids, they end up coming back.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think the further you go away, there's a lot less guaranteed, and that's going to happen.
It's a tough process, but with that, we've been talking about D1 rules changes, and I know D1 changed to they can't make contact till August 1st of their junior year. You guys, it's mid-June before you can make D2 can make contact. Is that changed or is that how it's been?
I think that's how it's been. Honestly, we probably don't move as fast with any of this stuff. For instance, if it was 26s, we could have called June 15th. Yeah. Right now is kind of when we're ramping up some of the stuff with the 26 class. So I think it's, hey, I'm not good enough at it or smart enough to sit there and go, hey, 2 years ahead from a recruiting class. So, and honestly, a lot of the 25s, like if I had to say, with our 25 class that we just signed, like it was, hey, by September it might have gotten kind of finished up, which is still earlier than a lot of places. But, I think we have to see, hey, how our freshmen play out, how everybody that we have in our current roster before we start figuring out, hey, what are the needs going to be in 26?
Well, and I think the other part we were talking earlier about the scholarships, you don't have as many scholarships or as much money as D1 programs or even some of the other D2 programs where you can't miss on kids. Like,
yeah, I like to say, there's things that you get wrong throughout the recruiting process, and you find out when someone gets on campus, hey, sometimes it's not a fit or whatever. It doesn't seem like nobody bats 1,000 with any of this, but at least for us personally at our school, like, hey, it doesn't going that far ahead, or we try and be a lot more specific or targeted with what we're recruiting, just because. Hey, for whatever works, hey, scholarship dollars, academic fit, hey, positional needs. We're probably, we try not to over-recruit, and we really, whether it's from a scholarship standpoint at the Division II level, you probably aren't in a position to really over-recruit.
And that's, D2 is 9 scholarships max is what you're allowed. D1's 34. With the changes with the roster size from 40 to 34 at the D1 level, I guess you haven't really had a chance to talk to many kids, but I'm curious if kids are going to start looking at D2 or change their opinion about maybe it's better to look at D2s, because D2 baseball to me was already very, very good. Like I've seen D2, been around D2, but you start taking all those kids that were sitting on the bench at D1 school and they're now able to come down and play D2. D2 baseball just got even better because now 1,800 previous D1 kids, whether they're playing or not, still are coming or trickling down to the lower levels where D2 is going to be really competitive and really good coming up.
Yeah, I think it'll benefit every level of college baseball. And then throughout the summer, and it's kind of funny. It's almost like pre-COVID and post-COVID, where I remember early on, hey, prior to COVID, you go into the summer recruiting, and everybody was committed. So I knew exactly whether at a Division II school or even when I was coaching in junior college, hey, if it's June, I'm going out. This guy's uncommitted. Hey, that's in play. As it's gone on now, it's gone back to maybe what it seems like 20 years ago, where you see a lot more players that are uncommitted later into the summer. And, it's kind of funny. There's a handful of kids that we kind of went through the recruiting process with. And you got to the middle of July and whatever the rule change kind of came out where, hey, it's going to go to 40 to 34. And you're like, why is this kid not committed? Like, what's going on? What am I missing here? And then, that's just kind of how it works out. And especially with the portal, and hey, there's some schools that prioritize the transfer side of it. It's really hard for, and not just at the Division I level, at every level. It's like, hey, for an 18, 19-year-old, a freshman to go out there and make an impact is becoming increasingly harder just because college baseball has trended to be older and older.
Well, I don't care if it's tough. JUCO, when you're stepping in and playing just with guys a year older that have a year of college experience. So when you're stepping onto a D2 field where you got guys that are 22 years old, and
we've got 24-year-olds.
Yeah. Well, with COVID, you got guys, and that's I know some of your roster, and I know some of those guys are older because COVID and different. This is the last year for COVID year for
some of the junior college, whatever it was, the 21 year that a lot of those guys got back. So it's getting a lot less confusing. Every year was kind of figure out, is this you forgot what to call people. It's a fifth year, sixth year. This is a COVID junior.
Yeah, he's
senior,
super senior times 3.
There's a lot more graduate students, and I'm assuming it'll start trending to be a little bit fewer graduate.
And that's what me and Kevin have talked about. It's really 2 or 3 years away from kind of hopefully settling down and having some sort of rhythm to recruiting, to the money, to expectation. Like, it's just, and I think people's perception is going to have to shift as far as expectations of kids that thought they were D1. The reality is D1 is really not obtainable for probably 98% of kids. Like, it's just at this point with the portal and NIL money, it's really, really difficult. So JUCO is a great way to get on the field. Mm-hmm. Or if you can get to a good D1 or D2 school like Maryville, man, if you have the opportunity to go play a good D2 school, take it. Don't be waiting around.
It's gotten easier. Like, the one thing that's kind of come up a little bit now, like, some people even almost look, I always tell it to everyone, like, at this point now, if you want everywhere to be a junior college, everywhere's unfortunately kind of turned into a junior college if you want it to be, which I don't think it's a good thing necessarily, but that's kind of what it is now.
I understand the idea behind, like, when we were playing, essentially you went D1, you sat a year, which was tough because sometimes you do go to a program and the coaching just isn't a good fit for the type of player you are. There's just sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I feel like right now, especially for college coaches, I'm glad I'm not a head. I'm glad. Well, I'm not coaching anymore. But like, D1 coaches have to re-recruit their team every year. I'm sure you guys have to go through who's staying, who's going to the portal, who's coming back. Like, you got to get that done before you can even go out and figure out what needs you have. Correct?
Yeah. It's kind of, there's always surprises, and it's I remember this. So we've been being on the junior college side, because there would always be somebody when I was at Jeffco, or hey, you have a committed high school senior, and all of a sudden they have a great senior year, and all of a sudden, hey, a 4-year school or a Division I comes in, or Missouri State, or whoever it might be, and all of a sudden, hey, you're losing someone that was committed just because that NJCA, NCAA are 2 different governing bodies, so somebody commit on each side of it. Or even the same thing that would happen, hey, you had a freshman that had a good year, hey, school comes in a year earlier and recruits one of your players. Now it's kind of trickled down, everything's out there, everything's out with synergy, everybody's going to see everybody, players have, whether I go through club coaches or high school coaches, or you go out to summer ball and someone's got a teammate, hey, this guy's pretty good at the school. It's kind of a little bit of the Wild West, and
and that's every
year. It's unfortunate.
So how do you go about building a program when there's so much turnover?
We've kind of approached it, or at least I've approached it, hey, we're going to do everything we can to take care of our guys, and we're not going to operate any differently. And just like everything else, hopefully you treat the players right, you train them right, and they're happy, and they want to be there. And at the end of the day, you can't really control it. If someone wants to, there's nothing to stop it, so, you can't control it. So I've talked to coaches, hey, we're not going to try and send guys out to summer ball. We're not going to do this. Hey, I think the easiest way to do it, hey, we're going to try and treat everybody how we would and not worry about who is coming back, who's going to leave, what's going on, who's talking to this person, which it's out there. I mean, it's a concern. You worry about it, but I don't think we're going to try and treat our players any differently because of it.
And it's just a difficult process when it used to be old school, hey, there's some tough love involved in coaching of teaching a lesson by, hey, you didn't run this out, you're going to sit. Mm-hmm. Now I feel like if you do that with some players, they're like, well, if you're going to sit me, I'm going to transfer. It's like this. it's a much more difficult. It's more difficult now coaching in some ways than it was. Now on the bright side, guys that you don't like, you can tell them to go to the portal.
Yeah.
But it's for the good of the player or the program, whatever. But if you're comparing, and this is, I think the gap is smaller. But I think the question I get asked often, really the difference between D2 and D1 from a competition level, a lot of the guys that are playing at the D2 level could be playing at D1. It's not that they couldn't. It's just this was a better fit, or they get on the field sooner. Like, do you see what's the gap or some of the differences you see between D1 and D2?
I think probably whether it's maybe the higher end player or the person that's just a little bit of took off, developed, and it's got to be a little bit better. And then the depth, I think, is kind of the biggest thing. But, as guys get older, that gap really kind of narrows as far as if we have a 21 or 22-year-old, it might not have been a person that had those Division I opportunities or weren't good enough to do that. And then all of a sudden you fast forward, and after 2 or 3 years, hey, everything clicks. I develop a little bit later. Hey, time in the weight room, everything else. I start figuring things out, and all of a sudden, hey, I've got to we would always have this in our place. Somebody might be in their junior year. It's like, well, heck, why is this guy? We had a fifth-year senior last year, Jacob Krager, who was 10th round draft pick. He was a left-hander that was 90 to 92, 93 up to 95, and I'm sure somebody could get there and watch. Like, what's this guy doing at Maryville? And it's like, well, when he was out of high school, he wasn't that guy. He got incrementally better every single year, and hey, he could have pitched a lot of places in the country at Power 4 schools, but was someone that enjoyed his time here, liked it, and hey, I think opportunities we could have lost him probably along the way, but fortunately trusted us, stayed with us, and had a great career.
I think there's a huge benefit to staying within the program, and that process. You start with freshman year with a high school kid to be in the same process and be able to develop a kid over 3 years. The kid's going to get more gains than if it's, hey, I'm going to Maryville, I threw well, now I'm going to go to this school, because the coaching is different and what the emphasis is different. Being able to stay and get developed by the same coaching staff that's seen and investing in the same things, I think that's part of something kids aren't seeing, because they're like, well, I don't really like it, I need change, when you're better off in most cases staying and working through the process and getting better.
I think a lot of it still gets back to just developing relationships with your players and having people that are comfortable with, that you enjoy being around. Like, we'll tell recruits coming in here, like, whatever it is, all the baseball stuff that goes on from the we could talk about this is what we do from a training standpoint, development, all the stuff we do with our guys and the lifting side, whatnot. But it's still people you want to be surrounded by for 9 months out of the year. Like, we're going to see parts of the year I see my players more than I see my family. Like, you want to be people that are supporting you, surrounded by you, that care about you, that hey, day in and day out, you want to be around.
You enjoy being around them because you're traveling with them, you're around them at practice, you're around that group a lot. So finding those people that you enjoy, especially the coaching staff, and getting people, just having consistency within a program is so important, which, I 100% agree. So when you're talking about some of the things you guys do you think there's something you do at Maryville that kind of sets you apart from some of the other schools, or what do you really emphasize that you're proud of at Maryville?
I don't know. I mean, there's so many people, like the two buzzwords that you kind of see, I think, with the recruiting process. Everyone talks about culture and everyone talks about development. And I think it looks different for everybody. And I think there's a bunch of schools that probably do a great job of it. I think I'm confident with what we do. I'm not going to sit there and say it's better than what any other place does. But, I think we've always tried to follow it as, hey, we're going to treat you right, we're going to train you right, and we're going to let you go out there and play, and we want people to be themselves. So, I don't think it's whether, we spend a heck of a lot of money on the tools and resources and everything we need, whether it's tech and data and all that stuff.
Yeah.
There's more things that we plug in for practice than I ever would have thought we would have. If you had told me this when I started coaching, I never would have thought this would happen. But
so you guys, do you track practice data? I don't know what the metrics you're looking at in practice. You get that information too?
We'll do it as much. I mean, everyone's, whether it's blast motion stuff for every single hitter with every single swing, and then all the Rapsodo data, and then it's all the video and the pitch tracking. I mean, it's gotten easier and easier to track it. And there's so much more stuff out there, which it almost gets overwhelming at times. So, I mean, if we go through, heck, we tracked every single pitch in an inter squad, as far as if we want to break down percentages of
Wow.
pitch counts, pitch types, swing and miss, chase percentage, and it's the same thing with the hitters as far as what they chased out of the zone, what were hard hits, what were weak. Like, you track everything. But even when you go through and look into it, it's like this is almost overwhelming at times. And I don't know if I have enough hours of the day to go through it, but I think it's great. You try and provide as much information as we can for our players so they can, hey, some guys want to dive in and really look at every single piece of data that might have been collected. I want to watch every single piece of film. And there's other guys that, hey, I don't want to look at it. I don't need to log into it. But you try and, or at least we as coaches, hey, we're going to try and do is give you all the resources that we possibly can to make you as good of a player as we possibly can.
So when we played, obviously, that stuff didn't exist. Like, that was – we went to me, and I'm sure you like baseball is a game of feel. Like, my swing feels good. This changeup feels good. Like, this grip feels good. It was all feel. Coaching in an era where it's more metrics, like people are aware of the metrics or they're more available. Like, how do you balance? Like, do you just simplify it down to here's the 3 things I'm going to analyze, or is it like I think that's when Ty was going through the recruiting process. A lot of the schools are talking about all these metrics. I'm like, but.
I think it's really overwhelming, and I think it's trying to find a couple things that I can take out of it and apply. And I'll be honest, like there's stuff at the data side that I've got assistants that dive more into it, that enjoy doing a little more, like analyzing it. We've got a director of operations, a computer science major that's involved in it, that sets everything up, that can really break everything down. Like, I don't have the time to sit in front of a computer. I don't have the ability or the knowledge to do it, but it's even just taking some of that information. Hey, you could dumb it down and this is what it kind of means. Or, hey, here's a couple pieces that, hey, there's the value in this. Because I think there's a lot of it of, hey, here's trends that you kind of see. That's what I think is really beneficial. Taking a snapshot out of, hey, this is one day what the swing looked like, or one day what it looked like on the mound. Like, hey, okay, you start gathering a bigger piece of it, then you can start seeing, hey, here's some trends or kind of where it's going. But I think it's hard to figure out. It's still going out there and playing the game. Hey, catch the ball.
Yes.
Throw the ball,
Absolutely.
hit the ball. Hey, it's not. We make it harder at times than I think it needs to be, which I think it carries over to the player. You see a lot more players that overanalyze stuff. Hey, all of a sudden let's just go out there and play. Like, ignorance is a little bit of a bliss where there's always the player that kind of dumbed everything down and, hey, I'm just going out there. I see it. I hit it. Instead of, it's kind of funny with scouting reports with the synergy and all the data that kind of gets, you can break down by counts, pitch types, percentages, zones. And I think at times with our hitters, hey, we give them so much information, and then all of a sudden the pitcher does something a little bit differently, and it's like, what's going on? Like, he shouldn't have done that. Like, what happened?
You can't throw that pitch.
So I think sometimes it gets to be a little bit too much.
Finding that balance in this next generation of coaching is going to be interesting.
And I think it's knowing the player, knowing your own players,
Yes.
and who are the ones that, hey, you can give a little bit more information to, and who are the ones where, hey, let's not overanalyze some of this stuff too much. And sometimes whether it's a good day or a bad day, sometimes it's just a bad day. Like, hey, don't worry about it, forget about it, just come back to work tomorrow. Like,
your best friend is a short memory.
Yeah.
And that's where I think players, well, if I did something wrong, then let me look at the metrics. Why I did something wrong? I'm like, sometimes you're not focused. It's fine. Your girlfriend just broke up with you. You got a bad text.
Hey, I didn't sleep real well that day. I had a lot of stuff going on. I
got finals. There's other things outside, and that's part of the game that's so difficult. Adding more information to that's what I know. Me and Brett Graves would have the talk at Pete. Like, Premier Pitching has so much data, and I'm like, that's just, you need someone to translate it and to go, here's what it means for you. Here's what you need to do to help you. But the trends I like, hey, you got swing and miss on your slider this much. Maybe you want to use it more. Like,
I think we get a lot of stuff on the pitching side. You can, and I've always been a pitching guy, and that's what I've liked doing. But I think we look so much as far as pitch types and pitch shapes, and like, you can be above average by just being the most average pitcher out there. Hey, if you can be, hey, I've got average stuff, the metrics, the spin rate, none of this stuff might not add up. But if I can execute 3 pitches in any count, whether it's, hey, I'm the 84, 86 mile an hour right hander, and you might look like Joe Average, but if you can do those three things consistently, like, hey, you're going to win a lot of games at any level.
I saw it last year in high school. The pitchers, and nothing against it, the pitchers have moved way ahead of hitters because I think the offseason training from whether it's Premier or Ace or whatever, the pitchers are throwing their secondary pitches for strikes. High school hitters are taught not to swing at the secondary. First pitch curveball, it's 0-1, and all of a sudden the hitters are going to have to figure out how to hit off speed because pitchers are figured out how to throw off speed for strikes.
It's kind of gotten harder because I think it's the trend is like you see at the college level, it's like almost, it's not as if it's a 60% fastball. It's really kind of 50-50, and there's guys that pitch, 60-40 as far as off speed to their fastball. So I think it's changed quite a bit, and then you throw into it, pitchers are throwing harder, off speed stuff's better, they're throwing it more consistently, and as a hitter, it's become more difficult. Well,
and the training for hitters has not kept up with the training for pitchers. And there's very few hitting guys that I've seen that, anyway, that's a whole nother discussion, but how we're teaching hitting is going to have to change, which that's a whole nother conversation. And I'm trying to figure out where I was over here. We were talking about Maryville and what sets it apart. I know you guys have some new construction going on the baseball side of things. What are you guys doing down on the field?
We've got an indoor facility that broke ground at the end of August, so they renovated our dugouts, both the first base, third base, and then adding indoor with storage, multi-purpose kind of room.
On the first base side?
The first base side. So, and then within that, then actually the project's kind of gotten bigger and bigger as we've gone on. So just with little things as far as redoing outfield windscreen, new fence caps, new fencing. It's become a much larger project than I anticipated, which is a good thing. And obviously we're very appreciative of our athletic director administration that have kind of supported this and got it done. So
for those that haven't been to Maryville's field, it's a beautiful field. It sits down at the bottom. It is turf. Are most of the D2 fields turf in your conference?
It's trending that way. I think there's more turf fields than not, or at least turf infield. There's a handful that might not be fully turf, but I think the turf infield's starting to be – it gets kind of hard to find in a place where it's a natural surface. I think I could probably count on one hand the amount of games that we played on a natural surface.
Umsel still grass?
Still grass.
There's still grass.
And it's become really different. So you go to those places after you take a ground ball on turf, and that's all you do, or you throw every single bullpen, inter-squad game on a turf mound, and then all of a sudden it's a natural surface. It's like going on the moon. It's different.
Do you ever go practice? I know CBC and some of the other fields are close. Do you ever go take ground balls on grass just to prepare for some of those?
We'll try to whenever the opportunity kind of presents itself. There's at times where, hey, it's weather-related, and, hey, part of it is like, hey, you can only get on a turf field, and we don't have the luxury of, we've gone over to CBC in the past or wherever it might be. So it's definitely different, and it's the same thing. Like I see it at the U side with my son's 12 years old. Like you're at Chesterfield for most of the games or whatever else. You're on turf facilities.
Man, I hate it.
Playing on a natural surface is different.
12 years old when it started getting. My patience with club baseball started declining. It was an interesting time. But as far as the turf goes, it is interesting. I feel like the infielders especially, their hands, their actions, their footwork has gotten lazy. Not even lazy. There's no need to work through a ball like it used to be.
It's different. It's you see it at that age, and it's a big difference. And, I get it. I mean, that's what it is. Or even the indoor facilities you have access to, or if you're at the sports barn, or if you're at All-Star Performance, they're turf facilities, and it's great for those kids get a million reps and a bunch of ground balls, and when you can't in wintertime in December and January and February, but
the benefits of turf, and I love turf, and I love being able, but I did enjoy a good rain out. Like as a parent, I'm like, man, it's supposed to rain Saturday. I might have the day off.
Yeah.
That was just me, but I mean, there were times I was tired of sitting at Pond or Baldwin or wherever, and I'm like, man, just a thunderstorm.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often.
No, it was like a good snow day.
Yeah,
like snow days are wonderful. The kids grow up, snow, yeah, like you get rained out.
I always enjoyed it when I was at Jeffco. It's like I enjoyed working on the field. There was always a day, and there'd always be a handful of guys. Somebody would complain like, "Oh, we got to take the tarp off," and then of course, the tarp would have a hole in it somewhere, and then you got to get all the turfus and the diamond dry and everything out there and try and get it ready. And
Yeah, I don't miss the tarp. I'm not gonna lie to you. That tarp, that's the turf. I would have enjoyed that part of it, but like, I remember when I was at SLU, it was like 5:30 in the morning. We're taking the tarp off, and I'm like, it was wet, rainy. Now that's the joys of JUCO.
Yeah.
Tarp duties, good times. But although if you go to Maryville,
yeah, you don't have to worry about that. No tarp.
so I think they're missing out though. There's some
I don't
good
think anybody. I
bonding.
mean, there's people that miss an experience that
It,
pulling the tarp and putting it on.
did you ever see anyone step on the tarp and the wind come and they get flipped?
Yeah. There's always somebody somebody gets caught up underneath it, pulling it off.
Or they drop. Now what I've found the last couple of years, taking off, we'll be moving, they'll drop their phone underneath and have to go back underneath to get it. And I'm like, you're just kind of dumb, but that's okay. It's fun. It's part of the game. It's part of the baseball. But anyway, one thing I did see in here while you were at Jeffco, you won this Champions of Community, which I didn't even know that was a thing. So what was that? Do you still do some of those things or try to give back to community?
We did a lot of community service. I don't remember specifically what the event was. I mean, there was always a handful of things that we try and find every year to do as far as with community service. It's something we've continued to do at Maryville. I know we've been involved with the YMCA, the Miracle League over in Chesterfield, and try and get our guys out there for a handful of times in the fall. But it's a good experience for the play. Like, our guys enjoy it. Our guys look forward to it and being around the kids and getting to interact with them and being out there. So I mean, I don't think it as much as being community. So it's just a good experience for
So
our
the
players
Miracle
to be
League,
involved.
do you want to explain what Miracle League, I mean, I've seen it. It's awesome.
It's essentially a baseball with a lot of younger players, whether it's developmental disabilities, and our players get to go out and assist in it, and it was great. We did the grand opening. I think there was one South County YMCA over off Tesson Ferry did the grand opening. They just redid the field, and it's a beautiful complex. But our guys got to go down there for the opening of that and be involved with it. So,
And I think sometimes when you get to college, you forget what it was like when you were younger, and especially you kind of lose track of. You just become less aware and almost callous to, this is a gift to be able to play the game. So to be able to go back to the Miracle League, just to shift the paradigm and the perspective of like, man, this is special. I'm healthy. I get to do things that others can't do.
there's a lot we take for granted.
That's a lot. And to have those, I love that part of it and being able to do that stuff. We skipped over this, and it was one thing I want to, with the scholarships at 9, I'm assuming there's much more at Maryville emphasis on making sure that they're good students academically to offset some of that cost.
Yeah, it makes it easier, especially when we go through the recruiting process, depending on, hey, if my GPA is a half a point better, whatever it is, it might be 3,000, 4,000, whatever it might be dollars that go through it. So for us, hey, we get to stretch our athletic dollars, our athletic scholarships a little bit further, and the better you do on that side of it, or any sort of high school student athlete, hey, the more options that kind of get open to you as far as that GPA goes the other way, and there's fewer and fewer options that kind of get presented to itself. So it makes it easier on us from recruiting side of it, and obviously on the players, the financial side, it's a big impact for them.
Me and Kevin Moore were talking about it previously, like just trying to keep your options open as long as possible. When you get to high school, get the GPA up, keep it up, because the higher the GPA, the more opportunities you get. And with the D1 opportunities shrinking, you're not getting recruited at the D1 level it's going to shift.
Yeah.
So more kids are not going to have the opportunity to go D1. They're going to have to play D2 or D3 or JUCO. And if you're wanting to play D2 baseball, which is tremendous baseball, academics are going to play part of it because there's only a limit of 9 that you can offer. So it gets split up a little more.
Anytime you can stack that and make it it stretches our dollars further, and obviously for mom and dad, whoever might be paying for the bill, they're definitely going to appreciate it.
Yeah. And if they're not paying for the bill, the student loan,
you're going to
appreciate
loan's going to be
it.
a little bit better.
And that's when your GPA comes down to a point or two difference for $10,000 or $5,000, it's worth studying for the math test. I promise you, that's an expensive math test of, I don't really want to study, I'll get a C. Don't do it.
Find a way to get a B. Even better, get an A, but
get the A's, get the B's. C might get a degree, but A's and B's get the money. So make sure you're doing that. We have bounced all over the place, so I don't even know where we were at, but that's okay. This came up, or it's come up because my son's doing it. The Diamondbacks now are doing like mindfulness and mental performance training every day. and it's kind of a newer thing that I'm seeing with certain teams are doing it. Is it something Maryville's looking into, doing?
We've in the past, and we've had Greg Taylor with GT Performance has come out and worked with our guys some. We've had some people as far as performance coaches that have come out and spoke with our guys. Now we don't have the luxury of doing this as far as on a daily or consistent basis, but it's usually we try and get them in front of somebody at least a handful of times a year. Hey, here's some tools, some resources, whether it's breathing techniques, something that you can apply. Because I think there is, I've kind of noticed, like just from a performance anxiety side of it, I think being in college longer, you see it a little bit more often, and it's probably, whether it's pressure that kind of gets put on college players or high school players a little bit at a younger age or a little bit more consistently than might have happened previously. So I think there's a great benefit to it. I think it's something you see a lot more and more, and I think there's always, with our guys, it's just, hey, find something that I can apply, whether it's to calm you down, to relax you, to
it's just more tools.
Not you're so tense, yeah. And they apply to a lot of things, whether it's, hey, I'm taking a test, I'm anxious about this, I'm not sure about that. I mean, it's not just on the baseball field.
No, and that's breathing patterns. And I've seen Nate Orff is the first one that really talked to me about the breathing stuff, and then he's instilled that in my son, which Nate's tremendous at that. He learned it from a guy that just wrote a book about breathing patterns. So Nate's in the area. If you want Nate to come down and talk, he is unbelievable at that. He's also a great hitting guy. Find a lesson with Nate. I was just actually, my son's there hitting with him now, so he's awesome with that. So right now your son's 12, which, man, I'm sorry. Not that your son's 12, but I just know that middle school time into high school was so, parents are not all parents, not you, I'm sure, watching, but some parents, middle school was the area where they started getting so obsessed with training year round and specializing. I am a multiple sport kind of guy. I don't know where you fall in this, like go play other sports, take a break from baseball, or?
No, I was a multi-sport person. I think my kids play, heck, we've got practices every single night of the week, whether it's basketball or soccer or baseball, and we're still probably some of the idiot parents that probably have our kids do way too much. But I would have people but I know people like going through this on the youth side, whether it's, hey, that even at 11, 12 years old, hey, I'm focusing on soccer, I'm focusing on baseball, I'm just doing basketball. Hey, we had to give up this sport. I always think, like, kids have fun playing it. Like, and I think it's even on the high school side that I think it's a little bit disappointing. And there's always a trend, hey, I'm gonna give up basketball, I'm giving up football, I'm gonna train on baseball, I'm gonna do that year round. It's like, well, it's fun playing football. It's fun playing basketball.
And you can learn things from those things.
Yeah, it still translates over. It's still being a good athlete and being able to do multiple things. But on the other side of it, it's like, hey, we give up an entire sport because I want to train a couple hours a week a little bit more on something, or I'm going to lift a little bit more, or whatever it might be. I think it's there's a small percentage of kids that are going to go on and play professionally and get those opportunities. You get a really small window to play high school baseball or basketball and do that. Go enjoy doing it because it's fun competing. It's fun being with your teammates and friends and representing your school, and go do it because it's fun.
That's the part. Sports are supposed to be fun. Like, this is supposed to be games and fun. The work part, when you get to college, it's more serious because, I mean, you're there to win. Mm-hmm. I mean, but high school, go enjoy middle school. And that's where it was around 12U where I started seeing parents being like, man, we need to do this fall stuff. We need to do winter. We need to do this. And I'm like, my son's going to go jump on the trampoline. We'll see what happens. Yeah. And it turned out okay for him. But
there's a time to do it, but I don't know if it's 12 years old.
No,
we need to focus on this.
To me, the biggest benefit, I played football, basketball, baseball. Learning how to win in sport or in anything, I don't care if it's checkers or chess, just learning how to win, to me, bred confidence of, like, I knew in clutch time I could figure out how to win. Yeah. And I don't care if it was on the basketball court or baseball. When it got time to win, I felt like I've been here before, I can win.
Yeah, it's still learning to compete and how to, hey, what a work ethic is, how to manage your time doing multiple things. I think there's a lot of great value with it, and on the other side, it's fun going out there and competing and doing it. I do it as long as you possibly can.
Well, I had one of my former athletes is playing. He's a professional soccer player, so he texts me. He's like, hey, can you train me this offseason? I'm like, well, one, I'm not qualified, but sure, we'll make it happen. But his whole thing was, I've trained soccer so much, I want to be more athletic. Because he was an unbelievable basketball player in high school and has just done soccer for years and been very successful. But he's like, I'm not moving like an athlete anymore. I'm moving like a soccer player. And I think that's, in any sport, that's true. You start just moving specifically to baseball and you forget the athleticism that makes you special. Sure. And getting away from that just.
I think there's a lot of the sometimes the overtraining, and you kind of turn into a robot instead of just being athletic and just going out and move and be an athlete.
Sometimes it's just throw the ball as hard as you can to see what your body naturally does.
I've always found it out as far as the youth side, at least with my son. Like, the less I say, the better. Like, when I start saying a lot, like, he doesn't interpret it the same way. He gets stiff. It gets tight. It doesn't move as free and easy. So, I kind of learned I'm going to keep my mouth shut. And
that's a tough lesson, though. I did it with my son. I'm like, just go ahead. Just go.
Well, I've given up. Now I just pay people for hitting lessons, whether it's former players or because he doesn't like listening to me.
There's a point where my
son
looked
with
at
everybody
me.
Eventually,
yes. He stopped looking at me. He stopped looking at me, a guy that's knew baseball, and I was just dad. Yeah. And thankfully, I had former players, Nate Orff, really, and Brett Graves, and a lot of those guys really came in. And thankfully, we have those resources, but other dads, sorry. I'm like, that's because it's a tough one. But I'm trying to see what else we got here. I do this. So typically, and for those that haven't been to college, and it's funny when they come back, they're like, I didn't know that this is what it was going to look like. What's typically their days look like when they get to college?
I always say ours get broken down into kind of 3 different parts, and whether it's we get our individual or small group stuff, which we get 8 hours at the Division II level with our guys. Now, 4 of those can be skill component, 4 can be on the strength and conditioning side. And then during that fall, you get your, essentially non-championship segment, our 45-day practice window, where it's, hey, I might have my lifting that stays pretty consistently over that 4 hours, and then it's 11 hours geared towards team practice or whatever it is, skill stuff we're working on. When it gets to the spring, it gets up to 20 hours. So it really becomes like whether there's off days built in there, guys need to recover. We take days off. There's 2 mandatory days off that we have to take by NCAA standards over the course of the fall semester before we get into the spring. But I think you get to a lot of rules. But it's just like you get to the point you get to college, like it's the business of your body. Like, I think more people understanding just. I'd always tell our guys, like, hey, try to find something every single day to do to make yourself better. Now, some part of it might be, hey, I'm going to sit around my apartment and go through some mobility, or hey, I'm going to go for a walk or move around. But I think that's the difference. It's usually it's part of the lifestyle. It's, hey, you're doing something every single day, which I think is a good thing to get out and move around, whether it's you're playing baseball or you're just a regular student. But I think there's a balance at the Division II level. I think we try and have a balance in Maryville. Like, we want guys to be able to, hey, the days, and I always see, like, there'd always be like the junior college story of like, man, coach was out, we were out there for 4 hours that day. I was like, I always tell people, like, we can't get this done in 2 hours or 2.5 hours. Like, we're doing something wrong as coaches.
I had that conversation today with players because there was a team that had a 4-hour practice recently. I'm like, if you were going 4 hours in anything, there's something wrong.
If I do something for 4 hours at practice or at the field, like, one, we probably shouldn't be doing it. I'd hear it from my compliance coordinator. But on the other side, like, then somebody else should be coaching the team at that point, because we didn't do a good job that day.
No, but if it takes 4 hours or a lot of yelling, typically there's something drastically wrong. But anyway, I mean, that's just last year you end up going 26, 28. I'm getting old. In conference, 26-10.
Yeah, so we finished second in conference last year, and
you won the tournament, moved on. So hopefully you got a lot of returners back.
We got a lot of returners on the mound. We got a lot of different faces in the lineup. So it's kind of we're doing exit meetings this week with our guys before Christmas break coming up, and someone comes in like, man, there's a lot of new faces in the lineup. It's like, well, these guys can't stick around for. Yeah. Some were here for 6 years. Like, it can't stick around for year 7 or 8. So it's kind of the fun thing to, we kind of go through this, and this is speaking to some of the transfer side, or at least how we've done things. Like, I think 75-80% of our roster is guys that we've recruited on the high school side of it. So, part of the thing you get this, like, hey, you got to play those guys. Like, for us, we don't operate just living and dying out of the portal or junior college transfers. Like, essentially, you recruit freshmen, like, you've got to provide those guys opportunities, get out there and play, or else you go through a cycle of, oh, heck, this guy doesn't have any at-bats. We got to recruit over. Like, you got to give guys opportunities, and if you recruit them, hey, you need to – hey, they work hard, they do everything right. Like, hey, you got to see what they can do. No one gets better by sitting on the bench watching.
And you have a lot of local. I know from Francis Howell, Alex Bryan's down there. From Holt, Chase Lasser's down there. Matthew Rouser is going to be coming down next year.
Yeah, his older brother
Tyler's.
in.
Yeah, I mean, so you have some local guys. I'm sure there's more. That's just the ones I obviously know. But local players staying home and playing is a good thing. I mean, there's a comfort level. There's a lot of benefits if you're in the area. And me and Rouser were talking, Matt. Because he was talking about he went out of town 10 times this year. I'm like, aren't you going 5 miles down the road?
There's a lot of nights in hotels that maybe could have been saved, but I'm sure it was part of this stuff. Like, I'm sure it's a great experience. Like, it's fun traveling and going to play different people and get those opportunities. But
at the end of the day, you're going to stay within a 5-hour radius for the most part.
Yeah, majority of guys, you're staying in that smaller circle.
So. Parents, players, you don't have to travel all over. You don't. I keep saying it, but now other people smarter than I, more experienced than I, are saying he's mostly looking at this area. So I don't know. I'll have some other people come on and say the same thing, and maybe at some point we can set some boundaries, because I think that was the toughest part, knowing what, like, we know going through the process. When my kid was going through the process, I'm trying to figure out what boundaries to set without robbing him of opportunities. And that's the balancing act. Like, in middle school, I only let my son travel one time a summer. And people are like, well, why? I'm like, I don't want him to get burnt out. I want him to buy him some snow cones and have some fun and don't get burnt out. Because if you get burnt out, which is the biggest reason I see kids not move on, I've wasted a lot of time and a lot of money, and he's missed a lot of opportunities just because I didn't set the boundaries, which...
No, it's fun to do everything, to get different experiences, and I think I see it a little bit at the youth side. It's like, hey, there's teams that go out there and we're doing a tournament every single weekend. I know, at least for myself and my son, if I said, hey, we're playing baseball every single weekend, like, eventually it's going to point like, hey, it's Saturday in the summer, like, I want to go hang out with my friends. I want to go to the pool. I want to go do something else.
I agree. You should do other things. College coach said it. Old guy said it. So I don't look as old, though. I shaved all the gray in case someone's like, you look different. Yeah, no gray hair. Anyway, Coach Evers, I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hopefully you have a great season. I'll come out and watch. I know several of the players, so I'll be there. You watching, the subscribe, click. We went through, don't push all the buttons, all the good buttons. The thumbs down, don't push that. Lie to me, say it was good. So, but follow, like, all that good stuff. I'm not technology person, but anyway, Coach Evers here at Maryville. Make sure you get out and see him play this spring. You guys start mid-February-ish.
Yeah, I think it's February 14th down in beautiful Pittsburgh, Kansas.
Ooh, that's a Valentine's Day. So you have a patient wife. Every coach's wife's patient. So anyway, appreciate you watching. I will see you next week.